The Hoop Heads Podcast is brought to you by Head Start Basketball.
If you don't ask for anything, you'll get everything. And we were asking for something very specific. Great kids, great academics, great basketball. And what that did was people would self-eliminate referrals and themselves because they didn't match those categories. And then what happened was when people thought of, oh, I have a great kid who's a great academic who plays basketball, I'm going to send him to NMH.
John Carroll is entering his 21st season as the boys basketball head coach at Northfield Mount Hermon School in Massachusetts. At NMH, John has coached over 70 Division I basketball players and many more college basketball players at all levels. He has led the NMH basketball program to the distinction of being recognized as the best combination of academics and basketball in the United States. In the 21-22 season, NMH will have over 24 basketball alums playing NCAA basketball, including 14 in the Ivy League. An NMH alum will play in all 56 Ivy League regular season games in the 2021-2022 season. NMH will also have alums playing at Notre Dame, Kentucky, Kansas, Texas, Northwestern, Washington State, UMass, Hawaii, Colgate, the College of Charleston, Tulane, and Elon in Division I. In 2016, Carroll was recognized by the Positive Coaching Alliance with their National Double Goal Coach Award. After attending Northfield Mount Hermon, John played his collegiate basketball at Assumption College, where he scored 1,551 points and set numerous records for three-pointers. He was inducted into the New England Basketball Hall of Fame as a prep player, college player, and prep coach in 2015. Hey, Hoopheads, I wanted to take a minute to shout out our partners and friends at Dr. Dish Basketball. Their Dr. Dish shooting machines are undoubtedly the most advanced and user-friendly machines on the market. Sign up now for their Virtual Camp 2.0 featuring 10 days of workouts with pro trainers from the Dr. Dish family. Learn more at drdishbasketball.com and follow their incredible content at Dr. Dish B-Ball on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Mention the Hoopheads podcast and save an extra $300 on the Dr. Dish Rebel, All-Star, and CT models. Visit drdishbasketball.com for details. That's a great deal, Hoopheads. Get your Dr. Dish shooting machine today.
Hi, this is Gannon Baker, and you're listening to the Hoopheads podcast.
Prepare like the pros with the all-new Fast Draw and Fast Scout. Fast Draw has been the #1 play diagramming software for coaches for years. You'll quickly see why Fast Model Sports has the most compelling and intuitive basketball software out there. For a limited time, Fast Model is offering new subscribers 10% off Fast Draw and Fast Scout. Just use the code SAVE10 at checkout to grab your discount, and you'll be on your way to more efficient game prep and improved communication with your team. Fast Model also has new coaching content every week on its blog, plus play and drill diagrams on its play bank. Check out the links in the show notes for more. Fast Model Sports is the best in basketball. Hey coaches, Jason and I here at the Hoopheads Pod know you're always looking to learn and grow, so we've teamed up with Matt Smith from United Basketball Clinics to bring you our first ever Buckeye Coaches Clinic. The clinic will be held at Olmsted Falls High School in Olmsted Falls, Ohio on Saturday, September 25th from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. You can get registered by visiting hoopheadspod.com and clicking on Buckeye Coaches Clinic from the main menu. We've put together a great lineup of speakers for coaches at all levels of the game. Bring your whole staff and get $10 off each registration. Visit hoopheadspod.com for more info and join us for a great day of basketball at the Buckeye Coaches Clinic. Grab your notebook and a pen before you listen to this episode with John Carroll, head boys basketball coach at Northfield Mount Hermon School in the state of Massachusetts. Hello and welcome to the Hoopheads Podcast. It's Mike Klinzing here with my co-host Jason Sunkel tonight, and we are pleased to be joined by John Carroll, the head coach for boys basketball at Northfield Mount Hermon School in Massachusetts. John, welcome to the Hoopheads Pod.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely excited to be able to have you on and learn about all the things that you've been able to do in the game of basketball, both as a player and as a coach, the impact that you've been able to have on the young men that have passed through your program. Let's start out by going back in time to when you were a kid. How'd you get into the game of basketball? What are some of your earliest memories of the game?
Yeah, I grew up in Rockaway Beach in New York, Queens, and there just wasn't a lot of choice. You grew up playing sports, and our neighborhood had a great tradition of basketball. The McGuire brothers, Brian Winters, some really terrific basketball was being played, and we hung out on the beach. We played basketball. We played baseball. We played football. I was a swimmer, and I just kept getting drawn back to basketball. When I was a kid, it was probably my third or fourth best sport. Swimming was probably number one, and then baseball was probably number two. And I was really intimidated by the game of basketball. There were kids who were just better. But I found, the isolating time of, getting to a court with just you and a ball and a basket. I was really drawn to that. And when other kids were, out doing whatever they were doing, I was at the court getting some shots up. I just really loved the sound of the ball going through the net. And I think more importantly than that, the math and science of figuring out, which arc I needed to put on from what distance and how to put it in the basket, it just seemed to, work for me.
So I'm assuming you're eating up analytics at this point.
Yeah, I like analytics a lot. We're kind of skipping a beat or two, but I was an accounting major in college, and I'm shooting 41.9%, and you're shooting 42.1%, and we're both open. I'd like the ball to be swung to the guy who's shooting a higher percentage. So, like those type of things, the numbers of it all, even when I was a kid, it all just seemed to fit. So basketball was huge, and I had great coaches as a kid, 5th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade, that were very, very instrumental and just changed my level of play tremendously from 5th grade through 8th grade because of the coaches I had and the access I had to just, really year-round basketball. It was great.
All right, I have 2 questions. So the first one, I want to come back to those coaches that you had at the youth level. Who was the professional athlete that you looked up to growing up as a kid? Who was your hero there growing up in Queens?
Yeah, he wasn't a professional at the time. He was a high school guy, and it was Chris Mullen. I would ride my bike around the city and find out where he was playing, and I'd go watch, him in the citywide tournaments. He would play at the St. Francis de Sales Easter tournament, played at Zavarian. I'd find out where the open runs were. And we looked similar. We played similarly, and I was just like, whatever he's doing on a basketball court, I'm gonna try and figure it out. So he was the guy that became a professional, but he was the guy that I really tried to emulate my game after as much as possible. And the best part was in the next neighborhood over. His youngest brother Terrence and I were buddies, and we played together on some teams. And Chris's other brother, John, was very good friends with my cousins. So it wasn't really hard to get, his schedule and just kind of, follow him around and see how he played. So he was the guy that had the most impact on me, period, on my playing career for sure. He had the most impact.
What did it look like watching Chris Mullen play pickup basketball back in those days?
I say this all the time. I ask kids, who do you watch? And it better be someone that plays like them. I have no business. My answer should never have been Michael Jordan, So for me, it was watching him figure out how to play amongst more athletic, quicker guys, how to play, how he figured out how to play. It was almost like, getting a cheat sheet, how he played against presses, how he came off screens. It was really easy for me to just that's how I need to do it. So for me, it was really significant in the sense that, he literally showed me how I should play. And I could watch, Bernard King go for 50 for the Knicks and all these great pros, but none of it was translatable for me. And when Chris was so directly translatable, we had similar speed, everything was relative. I was just not as good as all the categories he had, but it was very, very translatable to the level I was at. And that just it took my game from, point A to point, J pretty quick.
How did you take what you learned, internalize it, and then apply it to the way that you played? What did that process look like? Was that you, as you're watching him, you're mentally taking notes, you're actually physically going back to your house and writing things down and then designing drills or workouts for yourself while you're shooting on your own to be able to incorporate those things into your game? How did you take what you saw and translate that back into your own playing career?
I mean, I think we have a lot of examples of people who have duplicated someone else's game. I think Kobe did that with Jordan, right? Like so much of Kobe's game looks so familiar to Jordan. And I would do that. I'd go home and I'd write notes about how he came off a screen, how he created space. His pump fake was great. And like, how did he do his pump fake? You couldn't tell if he was pump faking or continuing with the shot. But for me, it was really his coming off of screens, flare screen, curls, using a regular screen, and just how he toyed with defenders who had the advantage. Like those guys had advantages on him, and somehow he was able to conquer despite not having the advantage. And I found myself in that situation a lot where I don't have the advantage. How can I create a chance here, to score? How do I create an opportunity to frustrate my opponent? And those are the type of things that I would just practice. There was so much failure in it, in the experimenting, but just trying over and over again, just repeating what worked and how was there a direct result that would work. But most of the time, I had to tinker it with a little bit to make it work for me.
Did everybody around him, did you know that he was going to be a pro at that point? I mean, obviously you don't know 100% for sure, but you're sitting there and you're watching him and you're friends with his brother. Is that the trajectory that everybody felt like he was on in the neighborhoods?
Yeah, he was different. I mean, there were really great players back then. Frankie Walker was an amazing player in my neighborhood. Boo Harvey, Rod Strickland, Darrell Walker, Chris Evans, or these Carlton Hines. I can go on and on and on, dropping all these guys. But he was different. His ability to score, his passion for the game just felt different. It didn't seem like he had other interests. Like this is what he did.
Right.
So he did stand out, and I thought. I didn't think there was anybody better than him. So I was like, if he's not going to be a pro, who is going to be a pro? No, he was the best guy around, in my opinion.
Did you ever get an opportunity to get out on the court with him?
I mean, he was older than me. When we shot around a little bit together, but we never competed. I never got on his court. He was just age-wise, he was just out of my reach.
Understood.
So we never got on the same court. No.
You mentioned earlier about having such great youth coaches at the 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th grade level. And I think that's something that is so critically important when we think about it, both from the perspective of what it does for players, but when we also think about coaches who might be listening to the podcast who are coaches at the youth level. What do you remember? Can you give us a specific instance or two or a specific memory that you have about what made some of the coaches that you had in those early years so special? What stands out for you about them?
It's something that I get asked, what's the hardest part about coaching? And for me, it was, it's always, I get better, smarter, and they stay the same age, right? So I'm a year more experienced. I'm a year better. I'm savvier, I have more experience. And how do I communicate that message without skipping steps because I've gotten better. Like I still have to be able to deliver a fundamental message to players without being bored by it. And the guys we had in fifth grade, Mr. Andrews, Bogart, those guys had done it so many times, and they were as patient with us as they were the first time. And they were as great a teacher as they'd ever been. And it never felt like they did it a million times before. So for that age group of fifth and sixth grade, it's instilling confidence and belief. I did not believe in myself as much as they believed in me. It wasn't even close. And it was to the point where I thought they were lying in their belief in me, right? And they made it really, really fun. And they gave us opportunities to think about it. And that was, for me, those were really significant, pieces of my development where they told stories about guys who were not fifth grade superstars and became high school superstars, became college superstars, and they were able to connect with everybody on the court. And I think a lot of times, and we happened to win almost every game we played, but they never talked about the win, right? That was just the product of all this really great stuff that they were doing. And you would leave the gym and you were like, I can't wait to get back around these guys again. And I think as a fifth grader, that's a gift where what you're doing in fifth grade, you can't wait to do it again because there's just so many distractions, especially now. And there's so many different coaches and you're playing so many different sports. To have a coach, or in our case, we had three of them, to have coaches where you were like, I want to do this thing more. And I think that was a real blessing for us and all of us in Rockaway to have these type of coaches at that age, fifth, sixth grade. Seventh grade, same thing. Eighth grade, we got introduced to a whole nother level. We had Bob Lucky as a coach, and then that was like a whole nother standard. But it was really fun, instructional, educational, inspirational. It's almost like the corny stuff, but it was all really, really true. And they believed in me. And I think I needed that at that age on the basketball side. On the swimming side, I didn't need anybody to believe in me. I knew I was really good. But on the basketball side, I really needed someone to believe in me.
How'd you get into swimming?
That was something my father put me in. I started swimming, I was swimming when I was 5 years old and was competing at the city level. And he had hopes and aspirations for me to be a college swimmer. And, I was really good. I was 50, 100 sprinter. And then I also did the 1650, the mile stuff. And it was great. I loved it. But the joke I say, and it's partially true, I just ran out of stuff to say to myself because you're spending so much time with just you and your brain. And,
right.
And I just really ran out of things to say. But I think swimming is a great, especially as a young kid where you can't lift weights. I just felt really strong as a young person. And swimming does that. It creates, really strong shoulders, back. And as a young kid, it was an advantage for sure having that. But I loved it. And I swim more now than I did when I was a kid. I love it now.
I would guess, and I am not a swimmer. My dad was a runner as a kid, ran in high school and ran track in college. And then he spent so much time running on the pavement that his hips and his shoulder and things started to fall apart a little. And he became a swimmer later in life. And I remember when I was right out of college as a former athlete. So I'm 24, 25 years old and trying to swim 150 meter length of the pool and almost just collapsing in death, not being able to do it. And I think about just you talking about running out of things to say to yourself when you think about the technique that's required and how efficient a good swimmer is. You watch somebody who's a high quality swimmer, somebody who is performing at an elite level, and they're just so efficient. And then I think of what that must have looked like when I was swimming down the pool just just a floppy fish and not being efficient at all and just being exhausted at the end of that, that one turn down the pool. And I would guess that even though it may not be directly translatable, that refinement of your technique over time, I'm sure helped you with basketball and baseball and the other sports that you played as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think, getting back to like the Chris Mullin thing, like I learned very early that technique was going to be really, really important to my athletic success. So, I use this getting back to the coaching. This is what I say to my players: imitate, assimilate, innovate, right? And imitate exactly how we're describing it, and then assimilate, make it your own, get good at it, and then innovate, like create something new out of it. I want to see something really creative. And I learned that from swimming, like you had to imitate the instruction. And it was almost like a martial art for me where you're learning a disciplined technique, and there's so much advantage in technique in swimming relative to just being an athlete. Like I could be fast, but this will make me faster. And especially in the 50 and the 100 where it was, fingertip touching to beat your opponent, every single technique tip mattered, and you tried it. So at an early age, I learned, all right, I can be better by learning technique. And then when I moved over to basketball and baseball and football and all that, I really carried that lesson over because I figured out I could cheat a little bit or get ahead or cut a corner by really mastering the technique as it was being taught and imitating it, and then assimilating it, making it mine, and then innovating a little bit. That really made a difference. But that was definitely from swimming, the significance of technique and making it applicable to what I was trying to accomplish as an athlete.
At that time, were you thinking of that only as an athlete, or were you already starting to think about that and how it could maybe translate to coaching? Were you still just focused as an athlete at that point?
I mean, that was, probably 8 to 15, where I really, worked on learning how to learn technique and how to, I call it like the brain to body conversation. But absolutely in school, you read about Bill Belichick writing plays in the library when he was at Andover. And I was doing that. Like I was drawing up plays and figuring out, which 5 guys I'm going to pick in the NCAA point pool that we created. And, it was, a lot of it came back to sports. And, in hindsight, I was doing a lot of coach prep as a kid, for sure.
Was it conscious or was it subconsciously? I mean, were you really thinking that, hey, someday I want coaching to be my profession, or was it just something that you kind of enjoyed tinkering with because that was the way that your mind was working?
Yeah, I mean, it was really, the question I was asking most is, how would I do this if I was the coach?
Okay.
I found myself asking that question a lot as I got older and older and older. But if I was the coach, how would I handle this kid? If I was a coach, this is the play I would run. If I was the coach, this is when I would have called timeout, or I wouldn't have called timeout. So there was absolutely that game playing happening in my head. And in some instances, because I had really good coaches, I also had bad coaches. I would challenge some of the bad coaches with, hey, why don't we try this? And so I was doing that as a younger age, for sure. And then it really started to kick in like 13 to 18. I was doing it more and more. And then 19, I did it a lot. So I was doing it more and more, for sure. So it started out kind of, unconsciously or subconsciously, and then it became a very, very conscious thing.
How was that received by the coaches? Different era that we're talking about, where I think today coaches are much more used to, much more open to players asking questions, players wanting to know why, players sharing. There's much more collaboration, I think, between players and coaches today than there was during the era when you and I were players. So how did the coaches that you played for, how did they react to you coming to them with questions or suggestions or things that, hey, we should try this? How did that go over with them?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't until I was really 19 years old and I went to Northfield Mount Hermon as a postgraduate. I graduated from high school in Poly Prep in Brooklyn, and I went over there as a postgrad. It wasn't until my postgrad prep school coach where he was really collaborative. Most of the coaches, there was an ego about it. There was a control piece to it. And back then, like you're saying, our parents were more tyrants than partners and friends. And that was just the leadership we had,
Absolutely.
How many times when you were a kid did you hear, you asked the question, why am I doing this? And the answer was because I said so. And that was that. So some of the coaches were not receptive to it, or, when I was 5th and 6th grade, they were like, come back and see me in 15 years, something like that. But I had one coach who was like, you're going to come back and tell me how right I was. And that stuck with me. And even when he said that, I was like, there is no way I'm coming back and telling you how right you are. Like, you are so wrong. And I know you're wrong. Even as a teenager, I know you're wrong. And I'm not. And he had like a real bravado about it. Like, you're going to tell me how right I am. So that was like the epitome of like the tyrant part. And it was terrible. And he was, now I'm 50, like, he wasn't right.
He wasn't right. Exactly.
He was really, really wrong.
You know what's funny about that, John? And it cracks me up. And I think you'll appreciate what I'm about to share, that there's something that I wonder if that guy even remembers saying that to you. If I was betting, I'd probably say he doesn't remember saying that to you. And yet that's something that you're going to carry with you to your grave that has probably had a huge impact on the way you think and the way you coach. And I think that's something that I always have to find myself reminding me when I'm doing things, that the things that I say, even though I may not remember them, they can have such a huge impact on the kids that we interact with as coaches. And I mean, I have things, and I'm sure you have more than what you just shared there, but I have things that coaches said to me that I'm sure if I went back and talked to them and asked them, hey, do you remember when you said this? They would have no clue. And yet those are things that I carry with me that either fueled me in a positive way or maybe fueled me in a negative way or built my confidence or tore my confidence down. And it's just a reminder of how powerful what an adult in a child's life, the impact that you can have.
Yeah, totally. I agree 100%.
So how'd you end up at Northfield Mount Hermon after you graduate from Poly Prep? What's the story? Why take that extra year and go to Northfield Mount Hermon? Just explain the process and how you ended up there.
Yeah, so my junior year, there was no 3-point line. I averaged 17 points a game. And then my senior year, there was a 3-point line, and I averaged 29 points a game. And it was such a the 3-point line for high school was so new. And I was like, I need another year to show people that I can do this, So that was part of it. The second part was I played for the Bronx Gauchos in New York City, and all my teammates were Division I guys. So like Kenny Anderson was our point guard. He went to Georgia Tech, and Dave Edwards went to Georgetown and Texas A&M. Dave Kane went to St. John's. Conrad McCray went to Pitt. Eric Mobley went to Pitt. Like, these guys were going all over the place. And I was the only guy who wasn't going to Division I. And I also, I knew who I was on that team. So I think the real blessing of it was I was aware of my talent in relation to the talent pool I was playing in. So when I was at the Gauchos, I was like, all right, if they play zone, I got a chance. If they play man, I'm not playing. But I really did think I was being under-recruited, and I was like, I'm going Division I. And at a high school, I had Division IIIs and some Division IIs, and I took some official visits, and I was like, this isn't going to work. And fortunately, my father explored some options, and we did some local schools in New Jersey, and I can't remember which one it was. It was either Lawrenceville or Blair, and I was set to go there. and they had a uniform, and I wore a uniform from 7th grade to 12th grade. I had to wear a blazer and a tie, and I just couldn't do it again. Like I was 18 years old, and I'm like, I'm done with blazers.
That's it. We're done.
Yeah, and I was, the financial aid kid at Poly, and I was wearing the same blazer and tie every day, and I just didn't want to do that. So at the last minute, we changed plans, and he allowed me to look at some schools in New England. And the first school we visited was Northfield Mount Hermon, and I met the legendary Bill Batty, and fell in love with the place, before I even got to the campus. Like, there's this long, majestic, romantic driveway that's like, a half a mile long, it feels like, and it's all trees. And coming from Brooklyn, New York, it was the most trees I'd ever seen. And the coach, Bill Batty, said all the right things. Like, you come here, you're going to shoot a lot. We're an unstructured, structured offensive team, and we really want to score a lot. And I was like, this is awesome. That was it. I was going to do a fifth year in order to show people what was up, like they missed. So that's how I ended up at NMH. And NMH, I played with, it really was some of the most fun basketball I've ever played. We scored 140 points, 130 points, 125 points. Like, we were scoring in a ridiculous amount of points. And I was averaging 27 points a game, and had all these, Division I schools came in and started to recruit me. But they were losing. And, I realized that if I was going to go to Division I was going to get, my ass kicked for 4 years, and I just wasn't interested in doing that. And then if I was going to win in Division I, I'd have to walk on, and I wasn't really interested in doing that. And what I came to realize is that I needed to participate in the winning. And at the same time, I needed to get a scholarship. So that's how I ended up going to Division II. But that process really, really helped in terms of me helping our guys with college placement. And, the ego that I had as a senior in high school was really impenetrable. And being more fluid in the recruitment process as a post-grad allowed me to find what was important to me, truly important to me, in terms of what I needed for a college experience / career.
So that's a pretty mature decision, in that you think about, and I think my story is probably fairly similar to yours. Like, I grew up here in the Cleveland area, and I graduated from high school in '88, and there were a lot of really good players in the Cleveland area back then. And I played against them all summertime, and in AAU basketball, and in different places and parks and whatever competition. And I was always the guy that was kind of sort of left behind, and people were signing. I'm like, I'm as good as him. I'm better than him. How come that's not coming to me? And I'm not sure I would have had the same perspective that you did. I really wanted to be able to go Division I, and then one Division I offer that I ended up taking, and it ended up working out for me, and I had a good career, and I got a chance to start for 3 years. But I think that was more luck than it was me making a really good decision. I'm not sure I learned anything from my story that I could pass on effectively to an athlete to help them to make a good decision. Mine was just like, it was the only offer I had. I took it, and it worked out, but I don't think it was because of anything strategic that I did. So it's interesting that you were able to kind of come to that realization that, look, I could go and play at a Division I school that may not be a winning program, and the idea of suffering through 4 years of losing basketball, being able to realize that, hey, if I just go a level down, I can have everything that I want. I can be and play an important role on the team, and I can also win. To me, that's a pretty mature decision to make as a 19-year-old.
Yeah, I mean, I felt like it was lucky more than intentional. Like, but looking back on it was probably more mature than I thought it was at the time.
Yeah.
At the time I was like, look, I just want to ball. Like, I just want to really, I want to play.
Absolutely.
But, in hindsight, there was definitely more strategy into it than just, I want to ball. I want to be on the court. But It really, I think it helps to share that story with our players, just to give perspective about, what we say all the time to our kids is who you are as a junior is going to be really different than who you are at the semester break. And who you are at the end of your junior year is you may not recognize who you were at the beginning of your junior year. And if you have the same perspective about colleges, then that's just not consistent, right? And you got to allow yourself to change, and you got to allow your perspective to change and be fluid, right? And there was no way I was going to allow my perspective to be fluid coming out of high school. And it did allow me that extra year to mature a little bit, to change what was important to me. Like Division I became like the sixth thing. And out of high school, it was absolutely positively the number one thing. And mostly because of the peripheral things around me, not what was true to me. So it took me that time to figure out what was true to me, rather than listening to all the other voices telling me what was the way to go.
What's your favorite memory from playing college basketball?
It's always, for me, it's always, players, teammates, the big games, the winning. I was fortunate to hit a couple of game winners, hit one to clinch the regular season title. That was amazing.
Nice.
But it was really the collaborative experience. I mean, I got called last week about getting inducted to our College Hall of Fame, and like it's relative to the basketball world, it's a small feat,
right?
But for me, it was really a big deal. Like I remember playing at Assumption and playing in the Andrew Laska Gymnasium, and that really meant something, And seeing the alums who would come back to games, and those guys meant something to me. So it's just being part of a fraternity, a family of guys, and having this, was it Army or Navy uses the gray line, like
right.
The continuous gray line, and just being a piece of a link in a chain of history at a place. That mattered to me when I was playing there, and when I got that call, it really, it triggered all those memories, like just being in the gym, working out in a place like Assumption, who had the history that it had. At one point we had more NCAA appearances than any other school in the country at any level. And like that meant something, So
That's awesome.
I think really, I think being a piece of that was probably the memory I take most out of playing college athletics.
That's awesome. Congratulations. I mean, I think when you think about that, I have not been fortunate enough to make it into my college Hall of Fame. I'm in my high school Hall of Fame. And to your point, not very many people care about that, but I do. It's important to me. It means a lot to me. And I think ultimately that's probably what's most important, because as you said numerous times here so far, you spend a lot of time in your own head trying to perfect and do things, whether it was with swimming or baseball or football or basketball, whatever it was. And I know I spent a lot of time by myself with my basketball trying to figure it out. And so those honors that recognize the amount of time and effort that you put into it, again, they may not mean anything to the greater basketball world or people that are outside of your immediate circle, but man, it means a lot in that interior circle. I can completely relate to the feeling that you had. So congratulations on that.
Yeah, thanks.
Are you tired of slipping and sliding on the court and sticky sheets just aren't giving you grip? Grip Spritz solves this problem without having to lick your hand to clean your shoes. Grip Spritz is used by countless AAU, high school and college programs, semi-pro teams, as well as NCAA athletes and G League players. Unlike other products, Grip Spritz has solutions for individual players, not just entire teams. We've used Grip Spritz at our Head Start basketball camps and players love it. To keep you and your team from slipping and sliding, visit gripspritz.net to learn more. What does it look like when you graduate? Explain from the moment you graduate, explain your path to come back to Northfield Mount Hermon as a coach? Just kind of give us the lay of the land of what you did after college and then how you end up back at your alma mater.
Yeah, so it was basketball. I was burnt. I was cooked. I had people talk to me as a junior in college, and they were like, you can go overseas, you can play. And I was like, wow, that sounds really great. That sounds really great. It's something I'm really going to be into. And then my senior year was really difficult. Didn't have the year that I hoped. I had 1,200 points as a junior. I ended up with 1,500 points for the career, and I was on target to set all the 3-point records in New England. I was really, really on target. And then I had some personal things. My mom got sick, and senior year did not go the way I wanted it to go. And I was really I was cooked. I was like, I don't want to play no ball. And I literally didn't touch a ball for over a year after I graduated. And a buddy of mine that I played prep school basketball with, Keith Ferdinando, called me up. I was living in New York, and he was like, why don't you come up to New England? And I came back to New England, moved to Boston, and started playing again with him. And it all came back. And I was like, oh, man, this is great. And started to love basketball again. So I was like 25 years old. And Keith and I found a lot of success in this pro-am New England basketball world, where we were having the time of our lives playing ball. And he was a great general manager, and we would just get these bomb squads. And we would just.
Hey, that's the best scenario. If you're not the GM, if you have somebody else who's the GM, that is the best role to be in. Because I've been the GM, and that is not a fun role.
Yeah, I mean, this guy loved it. I mean, he's on the calls he's on the phone all day anyway.
Right.
And he's, next thing you know, we got this guy, Pac-10, who played at Stanford, and Dave Hopkins, who played at Yale. Our front court is 6'10", 6'10", 6'8", all athletic, big, strong guys. We can shoot whatever shots we want. They get rebounds. They kick it back to us. We shoot it. So it was great. So found another passion for basketball, and then I worked for a couple of Wall Street firms. Worked for Frechter Detweiler, a small regional boutique firm, and then I moved over to Morgan Stanley and worked there for, I always get this number wrong now, 5 or 6 years. And I liked it, but I didn't love it. And the guy I was working with, my partner, he loved it. And we'd get a big account or whatever, and it really energized him and gave him satisfaction. And on the flip side, I was like, no, it's okay. So I knew I had to do something to find what he had. And I was very lucky that I had that example of someone who truly loved what they were doing. And at the same time, I was 30, 31, and I was like, well, I don't know how many more wins we're going to get out of this, this barnstorming thing we're doing.
Right.
And, I had a serious girlfriend, and I was like, I don't know if she's going to like this at 33. So I thought we would give it a shot, and I called my prep school coach and said, hey, I think I want to come back and give coaching a try. And, he hooked me up with the head of the math department, and there was no way I was getting in the math job, and then also the admissions office. And I ended up getting a job at I resigned from Morgan Stanley in May of 2001 and didn't get the NMH job until August of 2001. So I wound up working in admissions and came back as an assistant coach. And the first week I was there, I was like, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And it didn't take long. So that was.
What'd you love about it? Like what was it about that initial experience, stepping back on the floor as a coach? What was it about coaching that immediately drew you in? What did you love about it?
So to compare the two occupations, and I joke about this sometimes, like when you work on Wall Street and you work as a coach or a teacher, you're working with people's two most important things, their money and their children.
Right.
And unfortunately, it's in that order. And so, usually it's not, but every now and then it is.
Right.
But the work, when I was working at Morgan Stanley, we were bringing companies public, and we were pricing it at 17 and it opened at 150, and people were making a lot of money in seconds. And you just sell them out at 150 and the stock would close at 152. And they were like, why'd you sell me out at 150? And I'm like, what? Like, you just made a lot of money, man. And that there was no satisfaction in that. It was really just transactional. And, I don't know, what they were doing with the money. They could have been doing really wonderful things with it, or they could have been buying, more clothes.
Right.
And it was empty for me. And the first week I was there, I was like, oh, I see. Like, I need to be a servant leader. Like, I find pleasure and enjoyment and satisfaction in serving others on their path to achievement and success. And that's what was missing. Like, I wasn't necessarily interested in the personal glory of, I just made more money, I can go to a nicer vacation. Like, that was too self-serving and almost made me uncomfortable. And then when I found the space where I could serve others and the lessons I learned in life, the good and the bad, I could implement and, help them figure out what would make sense and work for them. That's when I realized that was what was missing. So I found that the first week sitting with kids and having them ask questions, and I'm like, oh my God, like, my experience is exactly what this kid's going through right now.
Right.
I can help them,
Absolutely.
So there was a real, for me, there was a real response, very, very, very natural response to that kind of act that hit me perfectly. I was like, man, this is great.
What part of coaching maybe came a little bit more difficult to you? Which one? What was it about coaching that maybe you had to work a little bit harder? That natural connection and being a servant leader and being able to share your stories with kids comes naturally. What doesn't come as naturally?
The gift that Bill Batty has, and if you're with him, that's the only place that you're supposed to be, right? So he made everybody who was with him feel that in the moment, this guy was 100% present with me. And I had to learn that part of it. To not have the person sit across from me think this guy is really busy. He's got things to do. He's got places to be. He's got other people to talk to. And I wasn't good at that. And I think as a coach, like we said earlier, they're paying attention to everything. And if you don't have the space and the ability to make that kid feel like this is important, it's gonna impact your relationship. So I was able to watch. I was his assistant for 6 years, and I watched him over and over and over and over do that, and I became better at it. It's tough to ever conquer the master, and like overcome their talent, their ability, but that was something I really need to work on, where, being present in this moment is really important. And for this kid, and I need to match that level of importance to that kid. Like, I have to be there for this kid right now.
Is that the most important lesson you learned during your time as an assistant that has led to your success when you eventually get the opportunity to take over the program?
Yeah, I mean, I think that was, I think that was, there's, I have to think about whether it was the most important, but it certainly was the area that I needed to focus on in order to become a better coach, for sure. I think a lot of coaches need that. So I think for me, that was, if it's not the most important, it's definitely more, in that conversation for sure.
What's the transition like when you take over the job? Because obviously the program has a tremendous amount of success, and you're taking over for someone that you've worked for, that you have a tremendous amount of respect for, and now you have to come in and put your stamp on it is probably the wrong way to say it, but now you're going to be the one making the decisions instead of making suggestions. So do you remember what your mindset was at the time in terms of what you wanted to do and your vision for how things should go or how you wanted them to go, that were going to allow you to continue to have the same type of success that the program had previously?
Yeah, I mean, this is the biggest blessing I've had as a coach is he wanted me to be better than him, right? And I try to do that with all my assistant coaches. The same exact approach he had for me. I was running everything. Like, I did every single kid who has ever played at Northfield Mount Hermon since 2002 has been recruited by me. I did the scheduling. I was, running some offense. I was doing some defense. Like, he was allowing me access to every single piece of coaching. And, that question I said to myself when I was younger, what would I do if I was a coach? Like, I was constantly doing that sitting next to him. And it wasn't second guessing or challenging him or anything like that. He was basically asking me to do that. Like, what would you do? And I was like, man, this is great. And I never felt like there was limited access to the program. So when the time came for me to be the head coach, it was supposed to be the 2006-2007 season. And I said, I could feel that he wasn't ready to go. Right. And I said to Bill, I was like, look, I'm not in any rush. This isn't, you're my Dean Smith. I'm in no rush to get you out of here. If you want to coach another year, that'd be great. And he grabs me by the arm. He's like, oh, that's great, John. Like, let's do it again. Let's do one more year. And if I had any second guessing about whether or not that was the right decision, his 300th game was at home and the place was chanting his name. And that was his final game. And I was like, oh, this is perfect. But when the time came to move over, I say it to young coaches all the time, you have no idea how hard it is to move one seat over, right? Do you stand? Do you fold your arms? Put your hands on your hips? Do you yell and scream? Do you sit? What are you going to do? And a lot of times young coaches that make that move don't think about that. And they just do what every other coach does. Well, everybody coach stands, so I'm going to stand. And I think the adjustment really is how am I going to be a head coach? Really, am I going to stand? Am I going to sit? Am I what is my thing that I'm going to do? And I think, again, the fluid part, I was just super fluid about how I did it. For example, I call the first 3 plays of the game and I let my point guards make calls. And I want to see what kind of game they're calling. Sometimes they're calling a bad game, and sometimes they're calling a good game, and sometimes they're calling a game that I wouldn't have called that I learned a lot from. I would not have done that year one. So I think that it's just, you got to commit to being a lifelong learner. And I learned that from Bill. And I'm always evolving as a coach. So my first year, I really wanted to set the biggest question I asked was how can we be different than everybody else? And we couldn't compete with the Worcesters of the world, the Brewsters of the world, the Winchendons, the Maine Central Institute. We couldn't compete with them apples to apples because we were a different school. Some of those schools have a lower academic admission standard than we do. So I couldn't go head to head for some guys that were phenomenal basketball players because they weren't students, or they were phenomenal basketball players, but they weren't good citizens. In our school, you need to be an incredible citizen, an incredible academic kid, and you got to play basketball. So then I was like, the question I asked was, if I'm a kid in Omaha, Nebraska, in the middle of the country, and I'm an amazing kid and I'm an academic and I'm a killer on the basketball court in that order, where does that kid go to prep school? And there wasn't anybody who had that market. And I was like, we have to be that school. So that was 2007. Every single thing we did was to that. So everything we said to coaches, everything we said to players, everything we said to recruits, every action we took was back to, does this make us the best academic and basketball school in the country? So in 2007, we started saying we're trying to be the best academic and basketball school in the country. And then a few years later, we just took out trying. And we just said we're the best academic and basketball school in the country because the evidence and the facts were there. But that was the biggest thing. Moving over one seat is, who are we going to be? And then,
I think that's a great question to ask. I mean, it really is. And I think it could apply to almost any coaching situation. What makes us unique? And when you think about what you've been able to build, and I think about, well, what's your program's philosophy? And you just laid it out that we're going to be the best basketball school and we're going to be the best academic school. We're going to be the best combination. So anybody who fits that profile, why wouldn't they want to go and play for you at NMH? I mean, it just makes complete sense that you have to build it and to be able to have the vision and then to make it a reality. So what were some of the struggles in getting there? Because I know it wasn't just super easy, wave a magic wand. What were some of the things that you had to make sure you put in place in order to make sure that that happened?
I mean, like, we get asked about our culture all the time. And before you have a culture, you have to have a language. Language predates any culture. So the hardest part was creating a language that could be generational, right? So if you talk to one of our guys from 2008, 2012, and 2020, and you said, "Are you 100?" they would know what that means, right? So with boys, I think if you take paragraphs and put them into 3 words, it makes communication easier. So are you 100? We believe that if you give 100% effort 100% of the time, you can predict your future. And we would have guys give themselves scores. I'm a 72. I'm a 100. I've only coached probably 400s in my career. But we have all that type of language. So that's one, is the time and the commitment it takes to creating a language.
Is that formal or is that formal or informal, John? In other words, do you have a written document, or is it more of a living, breathing organism that everybody just kind of circles around, but it's not written anywhere?
Yeah, it's, how I describe it is it's micro actions, right? So it's hundreds and hundreds and thousands of micro actions that you are constantly throwing at your team. And the message may be duplicated and replicated and repeated, but how you tell the story is different. The words you use are different. So I think that's, I don't like to write it down but at the same time, we use social media quite a bit and we use hashtags. So tonight we posted, it's Spike Albrecht's birthday. And we have a hashtag NMH champions. He was MVP of our 2012 team that won the New England championship. He goes to Michigan as a freshman. He was all Final Four, 2-time captain at Michigan. Then he goes to Purdue. So we post a caption, "Happy birthday to Spike Albrecht, NMH alum, Michigan, blah, blah, blah." And hashtag NMH champions. We also have another hashtag, leaders leading leaders. He was a 2-time captain. And then one of his teammates responds with hashtag NMH legends. And that's another hashtag we use. So to see the guys use our hashtags on their own profiles is great. We have a great one. It's a beautiful hashtag. It's a beautiful day. it's a beautiful day to kick someone's ass. You know what I mean? So we do a hashtag and we say it's a beautiful day. And Andrew Platek did it before every game at North Carolina. And Will Keresy, who was a manager at Quinnipiac, did it before every game at Quinnipiac. And Kyle Whipple did it before every game at Fairfield. And these guys, and, Jordan Seachin did it at Bucknell. So watching that language go with them is really awesome. So I think it's hundreds and hundreds of micro actions that really makes an impact, as far as the culture part of it. So I think that was hard. And then creating apostles, basically, and people who are going to spread your word was also hard. In recruiting, if you don't ask for anything, you'll get everything. And we were asking for something very specific. Great kids, great academics, great basketball. And what that did was people would self-eliminate referrals and themselves because they didn't match those categories. And then what happened was when people thought of, oh, I have a great kid who's a great academic who plays basketball, I'm going to send him to NMH. So that took some time to create also, and then it made recruiting really easy because you had a lot of people thinking about us because of the category was so specific.
What does it look like? Explain for our audience, and in all honesty, for me, what does recruiting look like for you at the prep school level? So how are you identifying kids? Are now, is it as you described, where people have a very specific, they have a good picture of what you guys are. And so if they have a kid that fits that profile, they know where to look, and you're one of the places that they're going to look, or you're the place where they're going to look. Just what does the process look like for you in terms of identifying players and bringing in guys that are the right fit? Just what does it look like?
Yeah, so, it's very different than it is in college. Like, everybody's going to college. Not as overtime elite and G League, but
right.
the great majority of kids are going to play high school basketball and they're going to college. A very, very, very small percentage, very small, is thinking I'm going to go to prep school. That was true really 15 years ago. Now it's way more common. But it's hard to, like if you're a hockey player and you're in sixth grade, you say, this is what I'm going to go seventh grade. This is eighth grade. Ninth grade, I'm going to go to this school. And then ninth grade, I'm going to reclassify and go to prep school. And I'm going to spend 4 years at prep school. And then I'm going to spend 2 years in junior hockey. So that's the hockey path. You're 3 years old, they know the hockey path. And the basketball path is more, it's just a wider range now. So we're still introducing kids to prep school, the idea of prep school and what it means. And, there's a lot of prep schools out there. And the good part is there's a prep school for everybody. The bad part is when a great kid who's an academic doesn't go to the right school. And now they're at a prep school that's more of a basketball factory. And the kid's like, well, I'm not hanging out with the kids that I want to hang out with, and I'm not doing any academics.
Right.
So identifying those kids, we used to call it hunting unicorns, because ideally we would have guys between 6'6" and 7 foot that were multi-positional and skilled and would shoot threes. Like, that's how we like to play with. We play positionless basketball, or high, averaging 87 points a game, and we want guys who are really skilled and smart and all that. But now with the increase in the amount of prep schools, we call it hunting purple unicorns, because it really is so unique to find a kid who wants to, the kids that we get are not kids who are having a bad experience at where they're at. They're having a great experience, but they need to have a bigger, better experience. So a lot of times kids are like, well, things are going great. Why would I change? And the expression we use is you always have to play on the next court. And for us, we think in high school, we're the last court. Like, we play college rules. We played 30, hopefully 38 games. We played in 7 countries in the last 5 years. Like, there isn't a bigger, better court than the one we're playing on. So that's the hook, is that kids are like, well, things are going great. I'm going to be player of the year in my state. And it's like, yeah, like if you want to be a high school superstar, stay. If you want to be prepared for college, you may have to leave, So there is that, the idea of prep school and introducing people to it, because I don't think there's a universal understanding of what prep school is, especially in relation to what people understand college to be. So it's a little bit harder of a pitch, but once they see it and they get on campus and see our 1,200-acre campus and the academic program and, this $35 million building and this $40 million building and the access we have to our players, and we're not part of a federation, we're not limited to how much access we have to our players, and, the support we get from Under Armour and the support we get from the school and the travel and the success our guys have in college, it becomes really easy.
All right, talk a little bit about the success that your players have had at the college level. Just throw some numbers at us just so our audience has an understanding of what you guys have been able to do as a program in terms of getting players to some of the best schools in the country, and then follow that up by talking a little bit about how you've built relationships going the other direction. So we just talked about recruiting players in. Talk a little bit too about how you built relationships with college coaches over the course of your tenure as a head coach.
Yeah. So I've been there 20 years, and the last, since 2008, we've sent 44 players to the Ivy League. Next year, we'll have a player in every single Ivy League game.
That's incredible.
Yeah. So there'll be 56 regular season games, 3 postseason games, so 59 games, and every single one of them will have one of our guys in them. I think, there's a writer doing a story, and he thinks that's the only time that's ever happened in college basketball. To put it in perspective, we'll have 14 guys in the Ivy League this year. That's more than every state besides the state of California. So they have 5,200 high schools, and they have, I think, 15. And we're one high school. We have 14.
That's incredible, John. It really is. I mean, it's incredible.
So that's the Ivy League thing. And then next year, we'll have guys at Kentucky, Kansas, Texas, Notre Dame, Northwestern, Colgate, Elon, Washington State, College of Charleston, Hawaii. Let's see, 3 at Harvard, 3 at Brown, 2 at Penn, 2 at Cornell. I'm sure I'm missing guys too. They always get pissed when I forget them. Soon to be announced, Siena. So we got
I'm looking at the website. You got Massachusetts.
Yeah, Massachusetts we've had. Yeah,
Dartmouth. I don't know if you said Dartmouth. Those are the ones those are the ones that I see in front of me. I mean, it's an incredible roll call. And how have you built those relationships with college coaches? Obviously, the kids that fit your profile are kids that are attractive to every college in the country. Obviously, they have the ability with their academics to open up a wider range of schools that they can consider depending upon where their basketball talent lies. But just how have you been able to build the types of relationships with college coaches to be able to help your student athletes make the best decision for where they should end up as a college player?
Yeah, I mean, this goes back to being the lifelong learner part. I've been at thousands and thousands of college practices. I think I've been to 150 different Division I schools. So my family and I went to Texas for New Year's Eve in 2019-20, and we went to, Shaka was generous enough to let us in the practice at Texas. We went to the San Antonio Spurs practice with my daughter. TCU AD is a former NMH basketball guy. I got to see TCU and Jamie Dixon. Jankovic over at SMU sent his kid to us, and he got us into practice. So, like, I'm just always going to practices and learning. So there's that part. The access that the college coaches are so generous and want people to come in and learn. And, they're like, if you want to get better, come watch. I've been to Michigan's practice and just I could just go on and on and on. North Carolina's. So I've gone to their practices, and then on the recruiting side, we tell the truth, right? So Phil Martelli from Michigan called the other day, and he's like, John, we've known each other a long time. You don't BS. Tell me about this kid. And we have a very straightforward conversation. He's like, I knew I'd get the straight shot from you. We're coming out to see this kid on September 9th. So I don't waste people's time. I don't call Mike Bray up and say, Mike, you got to come to our campus to see this kid so I can put on social media that Mike Bray showed up on our campus. He's coached 2 of our kids, and I called him about both of those kids. And, one turned out to be Ty Nash, captain of Notre Dame, and the other one's Nate Wachowski, who's there now, 6'10" kid, just an absolute flamethrower, who was the most efficient offensive player in the country last year. So I don't waste their time, and I tell them the truth. And over the years, our guys have been prepared. We say, we don't want you to arrive on a college campus. We want you to achieve on a college campus. And those guys, fortunately, have been prepared to achieve when they get there. And our freshmen are competing for starting spots, rookie of the week in the league. So what we have said has turned out to be true in the recruiting. And then they come back, we have, they know that they're going to get a straight shot. They know that they're going to get someone who hopefully is prepared, but we're not going to waste their time inflating a kid when we know it's not true.
How do you balance the needs of the players on your roster in terms of playing time, in terms of skill development, in terms of preparing them for whatever their goal is? Because obviously at this point, the kids that are coming to you that are a part of your roster are kids who are desirous of an opportunity to play college basketball at a high level. So how do you work with players, their families, their parents? What are those discussions like? What's it like during the season on the practice floor when you are trying to meet the needs of all your players and win games and do all the things that you've talked about, building accountability and getting them prepared for the next level, but also having a tremendous amount of success with the team in the moment when you're playing your schedule? How do you balance all that?
Yeah. So, I tell my assistant coaches when they're new to me a few things. One of them is be the coach you wish you had, and really think about that every day. And at the end of the day, ask yourself, am I the coach I wish I had? And if you didn't do it that day, fix it. Be the coach you wish you had tomorrow, right? And the coach I wish I had was transparent, upfront, consistent, honest. Opportunity is always available. And that's what I try to do, right? So with our families, we have every conversation. Like there's no, my parents can call me anytime they want. This isn't a local high school where they're going to see me in the supermarket and they go, well, I'll see JC on Tuesday at,
right.
at the Big Y. So they have access. And I think the true success that we had with our players is when that triangle of player, parent, and coach is aligned. And if you have an AAU coach, throw him in there too. But that's the sweet spot. So I want to have conversations with the parents as much as possible. And I want to get ahead of any issues that I know are coming down the line. I'm not going to wait for the issue to present itself, because then who knows what kind of emotional state everybody's in. I want to have the conversation as quickly as I possibly can and be ahead of things and present the scenarios that could possibly arise. So here's the good, here's the bad, this could happen down the line. Oftentimes my response is maybe. Like, I'd like to commit, I want my recruiting to happen in the summer, play AAU, and I want to be done by August. All right, maybe, right? Or you may not be able to commit until 2 hours before the matriculation list is printed in May, because that has also happened for our players. So I'm just trying to be upfront and as honest and being realistic about their expectations. As far as the on the court stuff, this is really where it comes back to being the coach you wish you had. I in college, I played on the second team and I would kick the crap out of the first group. And the next game, nothing would change. And in college, coaches get their 5 favorites and they lock in. And at NMH, my 5 favorites are the 5 best guys. And that changes literally every day. And our guys know it. And we don't call starters, we call them the first 5. And the reason we call them the first 5 is because they are the first 5 that have an opportunity to finish the game. And it's a tryout, and the games are tryouts. So if you're averaging 27 points a game, and today's not your day, then the next guy up has a shot. And our guys know that that's true. And every single day, they show up knowing they have a shot. And I have played on teams where no matter what I did, I didn't have a shot. So in our gym, you're going to see our guys going at it because they have a shot. We didn't have, COVID games last year because of COVID, but the year before we started 11 different guys, 12 different guys. We had 11 different guys be the high scorer. We had 9 guys score 20 points in the game. So it's real with us. So you don't have much, there's not much managing of ego when the numbers are the numbers. Like your son did start and he went 0 for 6. Your son did start and he had 20. And guess what? He's starting the next one. Your son didn't start today because he got his ass kicked in practice yesterday. Your son started because he was the best player in practice. So when you make it that, it's not quite the analytics that we talked about earlier, but
yeah,
it's still, you have a shot here and show up. And, what we try to teach our kids when you get to college, you're going to have to take someone's minutes. Learn that here. Take a teammate's minutes. And we create a very competitive space where they have to learn to bring their best every single day because everyone does have a shot here. So if you don't show up, you're going to lose it.
What else do you do to instill that competitiveness? Do you chart? Do you keep score? Do you track wins and losses? What else do you do besides obviously the most important thing where a kid knows if I compete and I work hard, that even if I was the 11th man yesterday, I could be part of that first 5 today. Are there any other things that you do to instill that competitiveness? Because I think you talk to a lot of coaches. I think that's one of the things that they're always looking to do is how can I make my practices more competitive? How can I bring that competitiveness out of my players and maybe get it out of a kid who doesn't have that competitive streak naturally the way we'd all as coaches love them to have?
Yeah. I believe you could definitely teach competitiveness and toughness. People are like, oh, you can't teach toughness. I disagree with that. I think you can teach toughness. We start every open gym with 3-on-3. So we have a winner's court, we have a transition court, and a loser's court. So we usually have about 18 guys, sometimes 20 plus guys in the gym. So 3-on-3 on each court. The first court to 5. The other games end at whatever the score is. So if you and I are playing on the court, your team beats my team 5-4. And on the other end of the court, on the transition court, it's 1-0. Well, the team that has won is moving on. If you lose, you go down. If you lose on the loser's court, you stay. first team that gets 7 wins wins the day. You can only get that on the winner's court. So you can't get number 7 on the loser's court or the transition court. You got to get on the winner's court in order to win. If you win 3-on-3, you get to pick the other 2 guys that you're going to play 5-on-5 with. We have 2 courts going. So we have the main court and then the side court. I don't look at the side court. I don't care what's happening over there. I'm only looking at the winner's court.
Hey, I got a question for you. How accurate are the choices that your winning 3-on-3 team makes on a daily basis?
Such a great question. I want to see who they're picking. I want to see if they're picking their friends or they're picking the guys who played the best against them in 3-on-3. Like who I want to see guys that are paying attention to that. And we'll call guys out. We're like, really? You think that guy was the best guy today? Like he was the best guy yesterday. He wasn't the best guy today. So I want to see who they picked.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
So to answer your question, like winning is really important. Like that you get rewards for playing well and winning. And that's out of season. In season, we do not do an uncompetitive drill. So we have about 15. So our practices are set up with the first 35, 40 minutes is you, the individual. We're working on skill development. The next 35 to 45 minutes is us, our team development. And then the last, depending on the time of year, is them. We're preparing for our opponent. We're doing a scout. So in the U part, the skill development, everything is competitive. We have about 15 drills. We rotate 3 a day, 4 a day. And those have, made baskets, reps, whatever it is. And we chart those throughout the year. And, we do a Columbia drill. And early in the year, everyone gets like 40 something. By the end of the year, they're 120. So I want them to compete with themselves and the progress they're making to make more progress. So they compete in that terms with themselves. I need to do this drill better. I want to get a bigger number. So that is very competitive. So we do a lot. Everything we do is competing. Everything. And usually it's competing with themselves.
Yeah, I think that's super important when you start talking about the ability to track and for you as a coach to be able to look at some raw numbers and see how that translates to what you're seeing at the eye test. And I think it's also a good way to have conversations with players of like, look, you think you're a great 3-point shooter? Well, we've been tracking you since last summer and here's your percentage and what you're doing. And it's I think a good way to at least start a conversation to be able to have an honest conversation with where you are. Like, look, this is where you are. We have a coach that I used to coach with, and he did something similar to what you described with the 3-on-3, where you're picking players, and he'd have 2 team captains per day, pick 2 different kids for practice every day. And then those kids got to pick the teams for practice that day. And so then he would chart who's the first pick, who's the second pick, who's the third pick, who's the fourth pick, and eventually you build up enough data where a kid starts complaining or a parent comes in to talk to you about playing time. And you say, look, we pick teams every day. Your kid is always the 15th guy picked. It's not just me who has the opinion that he shouldn't be playing. And there's, and then you obviously have other evidence that you can point to. But again, just by having the nature of emphasizing winning, and look, if I'm going to pick players to be my teammates and winning is important to me, I'm going to pick guys who are going to help me win. I'm not going to pick my friends. I'm not going to pick my roommate. I'm going to pick the players that are going to help me to win. And to me, there's no better way to, as you said, learn winning than to win and to emphasize it as a coach. It just makes complete sense.
Yeah, winners get rewards at our place.
Absolutely.
So I think this covers the playing time thing and also the competitive part. So one of the things that we do is we get them together as a group and we say, okay, we're going to vote. Who's our best player? And they'll vote. They'll be like, okay, Mike's our best player. And I'm like, all right, everyone raise your hands. It has to be the majority. If I feel like you're voting for a friend, I'm going to throw you out. And they vote. And Mike's our best player. So, all right, Mike, stand right here. And then we go down the list. All right, who's number 2? And they all vote. And I'm like, okay, that was the majority. All right, Bill, go over here. All right, who's number 3? Okay, Avery, go over here. Who's number 4? All right, great. Rowan, go over here. And we do it all the way down the line. So it's 1 to however many guys in the gym that day, 1 to 22. And I'm okay, great. Who decided that Mike was number 1? And they were like, you did. And I was like, I didn't even vote. And they're like, oh, we did. We decided that Mike was number 1. I'm like, no, Mike decided he was number 1. And he decided it last April that he was going to be number 1 today. And you decided you'd be 2, and you decided you'd be 3, and you decided you'd be 8th, 12th, 15th, 20th. You decided your spot here. And that shocks them to like, holy cow, like I am responsible for my spot. The team voted. It was, majority rule, and there's no other input here. It's just our playing and how my teammates, receive me. And that really puts them in a place of, I need to move up. And what I do is I'll say, look, in November, December, everybody plays. In January, we shorten the bench because it's league play. And I will go to like the 13th guy and be like, we'll stop here. And in February, we'll shorten it again. And then we'll stop here. And the guys who are on the other side of that line start to have some urgency about it. Like, oh, I don't want to be on the other side of that line of the guys who are playing. And I was like, look, here's the thing here, that this can change every day, and that creates urgency. And I think anything a coach can do to create urgency, whether authentic or artificial, and just have an urgency moment triggers competitiveness that the kids didn't really expect and didn't see that was happening and have kind of fallen asleep to it. And then they realize, holy crap, I've been competing this whole time and I haven't been competing hard enough. And that really triggers it. And then you see a leap from the group because the number 1 guy doesn't want to lose a spot, neither
Right.
does 2, 3, or 4. And 20 is now on a tear to catch somebody. And now you got this competitive thing happening. It's pretty cool to watch.
It's so interesting because I've seen and been in so many different situations, either as a player or as a coach or just making observations of different programs where the kids have no idea where they stand. And they don't know if the coach thinks they're the best player on the team or the worst player on the team. I don't know if I'm player number 4 or I'm player number 11. And I think that does, to your point, it can definitely lead to some complacency where I perceive that my position on the team is here. And that may be completely inaccurate. We all know that players sometimes don't always have an accurate perception of themselves. I think they have a pretty good perception of teammates, but they don't necessarily have a good perception of themselves in a lot of cases. And I think what you're talking about is giving kids a lens to be able to see the whole picture of not only their teammates, but also where they themselves fall into that pecking order on the team. And look, as an adult, whether you have whatever job you have, you want to be able to know where you stand and what's expected of you and where you rank. And people who are competitive, I think, want to know that. And to your point, I can only imagine what you see after doing that particular exercise, that guy 21 is like, I'm not 21. I'm going to move my way up. And I can just see how that could spark guys going at each other and really working and making each other better and ultimately making their team better and giving themselves more opportunities to improve.
I think lack of information and lack of hope as a player are killers, right? And I think as far as the player side, like delusion is the killer of all athletes. Like, oh, I'm really great. Like that's just destroyed more athletes than any other thing. But when you can create situations of that transparency and access to where they are, and it's real, like it's tough to argue a democratic vote of your teammates like, your
right.
opinion, you can't overcome that. Like,
absolutely.
Oh, man, these guys voted. And it's not, like there's a great exercise. I know you're part of the Positive Coach Alliance, and like they do a great exercise. Like they say, take the voices out of your head, take your parents' voices out of your head, take your coaches' voices out of your head. Now whose fault is it?
Right.
Right. And it's like, that exercise provides that opportunity. Like, now whose fault is it? It's like, well, it's your fault, and it's your responsibility. Like I'm where I'm at, and I should have praise. Like I've done this. So like, that's the part that I really like is, if you take the coach's voice out, you take the parents' voice out, you take whoever, and now whose fault is it?
It becomes a lot harder. It becomes a lot harder to delude yourself in that scenario. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. It's like, for us, it's personal accountability, best version of yourself. Those are the things that we're working on. And those micro actions, this is just more of those micro actions that teach you personal accountability, best version of yourself.
Absolutely. John, we are coming up close to an hour and a half. I do feel like, shout out to Trey Morin, I do feel like we got the real JC. So I think we had a great discussion. I really appreciate it. Before we get out, great. I want to give you an opportunity to share how people can reach out to you, find out more about your program, connect with you on social media. And then after you do that, I'll jump back in and wrap things up.
Great. So if they need my contact information, it's on our website, nmhschool.org. And my email is jcarroll@nmhschool.org. And then if they want to get me at all on social media, NMH Basketball on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. It's all the same. So they can just direct message any of those sites and they can get a hold of me.
Perfect. John, I cannot thank you enough for taking the time out of your schedule, staying up late with us tonight. We really truly appreciate it. And to everyone out there, thanks for listening, and we will catch you on our next episode. Thanks.
Thanks for listening to the Hoop Heads podcast, presented by Head Start Basketball.